First of all, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Julian Roberson. I am joined by I am a graduate assistant in the career services office. So I may have met with some of you throughout your recruiting journeys. I'm joined by another graduate assistant, Chidi, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But we have a great line of panelists here for you. We try to be intentional about targeting people with a variety of different backgrounds so they can share their diverse perspectives. Chidi, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and then we can introduce the panelists.
Cool. Thanks, Julian. So as Julian said, my name is Chidi. I am a second year Wharton MBA student and also a graduate assistant in the college's career services office. So yeah, maybe I have seen some of you guys in appointments or edited your resumes or cover letters. But as Julian said, we're super excited to have you guys here. We know we get a lot of questions about consulting in general. So we are really grateful to the panelists tonight. They're a mix of first year and second year MBAs to sort of share what their perspective was before business school. And we have some prepared questions that we'll be asking the panelists, but we'll definitely leave about like 15, 20-ish minutes. So at the tail end of this, so you guys can like ask the questions that you might specifically have.
So I guess I can kick us off with introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Inga Chen. I am a first-year Wharton MBA student. I am a graduate of Cornell University, where I studied industrial and labor relations with a business minor. I was at Accenture Strategy, where I was working primarily on operating models and growth strategy for high-tech clients. And I was a manager before I got to Wharton, and actually am sponsored, but I'm not sure if I'll go back, but great to be here tonight and excited to answer your guys' questions.
Inga, what does sponsored mean?
Great question, Chidi. So for some companies, they will actually pay for your business school or for part of your business school. And the sponsorship program varies depending on the school, depending on the company. Some of them will pay the tuition up front. Some of them will do it after you come back. But generally, this means that you do have a job offer lined up after school, which is really exciting. So it's great that some people have that option going into school.
Awesome. I'll go in order of the people on my screen. Francisco, do you want to go next?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Francisco Vargas. I went to MIT for undergrad. I studied mechanical engineering. Like Inga, I also worked at Accenture Strategy for the past 5 years. The latter 3, I worked particularly with retail clients. So just retail strategy across the board with apparel, retailers, hardware, even grocery as well. Yeah, right before Wharton, I was a third-year consultant.
Awesome. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian. I graduated from WashU in St. Louis. I did computer science and finance. Computer science was the primary major. And I started work at BCG, being just a generalist, so no specialty. I am 10 months away from becoming a project leader, which means I lead the projects on the ground.
Nice. We have some ambitious panelists here tonight. Alice, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd love to. Very happy to be here tonight. My name is Alice. You can absolutely call me Alice. It's no problem. I accept every name associated with me. Originally from Milan, from Italy, I was a McKinsey. So strategy consulting, I was a generalist there. I worked, on a variety of projects and functions. I was studying in a European university. You're probably not familiar with it, but my major was business and entrepreneurship. And again, super excited to tell you more about my experience and answer your questions tonight.
Awesome. And last but not least, Kat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kat Miller. I am a second year MBA with Alice. I went to the University of Virginia for my undergrad. I was a commerce major there, and my concentrations were marketing, management, and global commerce. I joined Deloitte after graduation in New York, first as a generalist in their strategy and operations division, and then about a year into it, realized I really loved M&A. So I transitioned into their M&A practice and was primarily doing post-merger integration work. So like org restructuring and synergy realization and all the fun things that come along with smushing two companies together into one. I was a consultant, which is, I was 3 years out of college when I went back to get my MBA. So I'm a little bit on the younger end. I too was sponsored, but I've actually decided to go over to the client side and will be in a role that I was actually previously serving after graduation. And I think that's it, right? Yeah, okay, hi.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for those great introductions. So the first question that we want to kick off with is, get a sense of, why did you all decide to pursue consulting? I think, we get, there's often a lot of influx of opinions from our colleagues, parents, and professors as well in terms of, the types of jobs that we should pursue. So, why all did you decide to pursue consulting, and what other roles did you, I guess, consider as well? If we could hear from a few of you all, that would be great.
I can kick us off. So Cornell was pretty pre-professional in the major that I was in. There were a couple options. A lot of people were pre-law. Some people ended up doing business like consulting and iBanking, and some people went into human resources. So there were definitely a ton of options, but I kind of found myself on the finance and consulting track. In my junior year, I actually received a finance offer pretty early on with a company that I was really excited about. So I decided to take that. But meanwhile, I was still involved in some consulting clubs on campus, did a couple case competitions, and found myself really enjoying the experience. So after I did my summer internship in finance, I decided I wanted to recruit full-time for consulting to see how that would shake out. Ultimately, I did end up going with consulting because I felt that I wanted a more dynamic lifestyle where I'd be able to jump from different projects, try different things out, get the opportunity to work with different types of clients, and also, all these different industries as well. So getting both the breadth and depth of experience. And this was only, I worked at Accenture for 5 years and was able to work in several industries throughout that time. And I think it's also been great to work with several different types of teams as well, ranging from teams of literally myself and someone who was senior to me to, teams of about 15 people as well. So it's been great to have that type of variety. And I think, when I was doing my internship in finance, it felt a little bit more predictable on a day-to-day basis. So I really appreciated having a little bit more of a dynamic lifestyle in consulting.
I can follow up on that. So I think the way I thought about it was sort of threefold. I think firstly, I thought broadly, do I want to go technical or do I want to go business? Because I was computer science major, I had that option. And I'm sure some of you are engineering or math majors, you have that option, right? And the way I thought about it was, well, which one would I be better at? And which one was I more interested in? I was an average coder, but I thought I was pretty good and interested in business. So I went that route. The second lens was more of like, within business, I think there are a couple really good sort of 2 years out of undergrad programs that can really train you. Investment banking and consulting predominantly are the ones. They really put you through the ringer, but you see a lot. And because I had a growth mindset, I decided to go down, the consulting route, and investment banking had some trade-offs that I just didn't want to make. So I decided to go consulting. And then the third fold is just making sure that the job itself was a match for me. So there's a lot of traveling. Do you like travel? There's a lot of like changing of teams. Do you like that? There's a lot of like, you're not building much expertise. You're just flitting around between different industries. Are you okay with that? Are you comfortable with that? And if those are yeses, and then if you talk to people who have already done it and they also paint a picture that you're pretty interested in, that's a good indication that that's probably a good path for you. And that's essentially how I chose to do consulting, is just those steps.
I can continue. So I was at a pivoting point in my career, kind of a career interest right before graduation. I always thought I wanted to be kind of like an architect, which kind of turned into engineering throughout my 4 years. And then my last kind of spring, I took a spring internship of senior year, and it was in structural engineering in New York. Like, I thought I was gonna love it. And after that month, I realized, like, oh my God, I hate this. And I only have 3 months left till graduation, and I have no job prospects. Like, what am I gonna do? I knew I wanted to end up in New York. And then I just realized, like, well, okay, what are my options? So I went to the spring career fair. The major industries there were like, tech, finance, and consulting. Back then, most of my classmates would go into tech and software engineering roles. So I had a very narrow view of what potential roles I could have in tech. So I crossed those out. When it came to finance, I wasn't really very interested in it to begin with. And then lastly, I think the key factor for me was like, okay, well, at this point in my career, or in my, my 4 years here, what could give me the exposure to like a wide range of industries and functions as an entry-level job. And consulting was like, there was no kind of competition there, right? Like, that was the perfect fit for me at the time. And so Accenture Strategy just happened to be recruiting at the time. And so I went for it. And to this day, like, I don't regret it. Like, it's exactly what I needed at the time. And it just fit hand in glove. So.
I'll jump in because I definitely relate to something that Francisco just said. I was also, coming from business and entrepreneurship. I wasn't really a specialist of anything, or I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So the option to, explore different functions and industries was extremely compelling to me. But also during my internship experiences, I kept observing how, successful founders, people that were considered high potential, very successful, they kept coming from consulting backgrounds. And I remember thinking, wow, what is it that is happening to people that go through these firms? And I think that I got interested in it definitely for the validation aspect, like the idea of having such a strong, being associated with such a strong brand. And I probably haven't healed from that completely, being at Wharton right now, from that need. But also really, I was open and keen to spend my first years, the first years of my career, working maybe long hours, maybe, in a bit of a tough culture, but with knowing that I would have had the return to learn and grow as a 360-degree professional. Those were my expectations as I was thinking about consulting after graduation.
I'll just add one final thing and I'll be fast, I promise. I remember my senior year of college looking at the consultants that were 4 or 5 years into the job and had transitioned out into industry. And a lot of them were transitioning out into roles that were much more advanced than they would be able to progress to if they had just gone to that company right after graduation and worked their way up. And so in my mind, I was like, this seems like an accelerator, both from a learning perspective, from a career perspective. And obviously the networks that you build at these firms, you can use them to get awesome jobs after you spend time there. So from an exit opportunity perspective too, I was like, this seems to be a pretty good investment in my career.
Thank you guys, that was great. There's definitely some nuggets that we want to dig into a little bit later, but for our next question, we're just really curious. So I am not a consultant, spoiler alert, but I have had jobs before. And I will say that what I studied in school, I was a liberal arts major, had pretty much nothing to do with any of the roles that I went into. But I'm just curious, and you guys have like a variety of backgrounds from like very technical to maybe more generalist. How useful was your undergraduate field of study when you were in the role? And if it wasn't very useful, what are some other, I guess, skills or experiences that you took with you from undergrad that proved to be very transferable?
I can kick off to spare Inga the need to kick us off the third time. So in terms of hard skills, I was a finance major. That definitely helped. Financial modeling in some way, shape, or form, and then understanding financial statements will be a given, I would say, in most cases. I think strong math, just being able to understand like the flow of dollars and, do math quickly and have an aptitude for it, is also really helpful. But I think anyone who has a college degree will be able to do it pretty well. I think you would hit the ceiling of technical skills sort of value there, and most of it is just like mindset, grit, communications, and these things you do learn from undergrad. It's just there's no class that I would point you to. Like you have to have worked in teams. You have to be comfortable working with different styles, but those experiences would serve you well.
I think for me, it was my undergrad degree was super helpful in my consulting career, primarily through kind of like the problem solving aspect. So in undergrad, like most of my classes involved problem sets that I had to work with other students. And in some cases, like the problems were ambiguous, and that kind of translated into consulting, right? I was working constantly in an ambiguous environment with people, like Brian said, people with different personalities, and you just had to roll with the punches, adapt, and kind of be able to be comfortable with problem solving for objectives that like may kind of change as the project goes on. And also to Brian's point, the quantitative skills were very helpful for modeling and just general data analysis and being able to extract insights from data.
So interestingly enough, I'm sure this is probably the case at most firms, the way that Deloitte approached like your very, very first training is they assumed no matter what your background was, that you were coming in with essentially a blank slate. And so for people like me that hadn't done super technical modeling, I was certainly, less comfortable with the tool, but the skills that they gave me got me up to speed pretty quickly. So it is definitely helpful if you have it, but if you don't have an opportunity to take, every single technical class before you graduate, a lot of times you'll get that training on the job in the first couple of weeks, and then certainly once you get to your projects as you dig into things. But I think about it from like the recruiting perspective. A lot of times, what they're analyzing is just your thought process and the way that you logic through things. And so any opportunity for critical reasoning and critical thinking, I think is super helpful.
Yeah, seconding everything that Kat said, I mean, we have an extensive at McKinsey, my office in Milan, and I think it's common in other offices as well. We have a very intense training as we join, and the attitude of most managers, especially in your early projects, are and of bosses, partners, managers and other similar roles, is very much like every time you enter a new project, I'll just help you understand everything that you need, and you'll have access to resources and knowledge to kind of figure out what is there to know. I think that definitely, it was said already, the quantitative skills are important. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have the technical skills, but that could help. Something that was very, I think, very helpful to me, rather than a class, was to, I remember that I took part in as many case competitions as I could. I remember that there were many, companies coming to our university and kind of, just drop there a prompt and just asking, hey, we don't know how to think about the future of our industry or the future of that. And with a group of friends, I think that we participated in probably 6 or 7 of those. And it's that attitude of okay, I see a very large problem, a very wide problem. What do I do to kind of like break it down, find data to back up my assumptions, and then present recommendations, which is exactly as the consulting, as the case interview wants you to prove. And I'm seeing some comments in the chat from the others. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for those great insights. So some of you all mentioned, the great exit opportunities that can come out of a couple of years in consulting. But on the flip side, can some of you speak to, what is the general career trajectory for someone who enters consulting at a junior role?
I can take that. For Accenture strategy, if you're entry level, you join what they call this strategy analyst development program, where the goal is in 2 years, you basically get promoted to consultant, and those 2 years you're essentially a generalist and get exposed to all the industries and functions and all that good stuff. And then the expectation is once you get to consultant, you specialize in either an industry or a particular kind of functional practice. And then from there gets a little bit more hazy. It's more about performance from then on. So if you're like a rock star consultant, you can make manager in like 2 years, I think, with a grain of salt. And but yeah, and Inga, like, correct me if I'm, add something if I'm wrong or anything.
Nope, that was great. Yeah, I mean, most people spend about 3 to 4 years at consultant, and then 3 years at manager, and then I think 4 to 5 for senior manager. And then once you make managing director, I think that's where I'm a little bit unclear. It seems like you can spend a while there if you want to, but yeah, there are other exit opportunities at any point in those years.
Yeah, McKinsey, when you join right after school, or let's say within a year after school, you are going to be an analyst. Again, the entry role. What is interesting is that depending on the office, you have to spend 2 to 3 years in the role, but then you have the option. You typically have 4 options. So one is to be sponsored to go to an MBA, which is what I decided to do, or transfer to another office to get international experience. Third is to go work for a client, again, a year or a couple of years working as, chief of staff, meaning right arm of a CEO or someone in a C-suite level. Or, well, obviously the fourth option is to leave the golden cage of the wonderful place of consulting. And I think that if you choose that route at any point after having done consulting, you are just a very good candidate for a variety of roles.
Okay, you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So for Deloitte, the way it works is you come in as a business analyst right out of undergrad. You're there for 2 years. Next is consultant, another 2 years. Next is senior consultant, another 2 years. And then once you are promoted from senior consultant to manager, that's when you finally have to specialize officially. And it's either, again, a function specialization or an industry specialization. And then manager to senior manager is usually 3 to 4 years. Senior manager 4 years, and then you either break off and become a managing director, which is a salaried role, or a partner or principal where you actually have equity in the firm. But the first couple of levels out of undergrad are all pretty fixed. It's like you spend 2 years, and then you progress, and you move up, but you don't have to specialize for quite a while.
The way it works in BCG is also 2-year steps and total 10 years to equity partner. And it's also up or out. So you kind of have to make the timeline, otherwise you're out. So there's no like staying in a role for 3 years. It's like a 2-year fixed time frame. But if you're a rock star, it could be slightly less than 2 years. It's associate 2 years, consultant 2 years, project leader 2 years, which is when you start managing projects, principal 2 years, and then non-equity partner 2 years. And then after that, you're elected to the partnership.
Cool. So it sounds like there's a variety of trajectories. So depending on when you kind of realize that you want to do consulting, it might be, after you've done like an internship or two, and maybe you don't land that consulting internship. Just curious, from all of your past like experiences on the job, what other industries or roles do you think that translates really well that maybe students might look to do for a summer to sort of get them in the mindset of thinking like a consultant, and then also it looks good on their resume?
I really want to take this one because I've done multiple internships, as not just college internships, but also longer projects prior to getting in McKinsey. So, if you think about what skills are required to be successful as a consultant, you have the quantitative aspect. So any job that is related to data analysis, business analysis, sales analysis will do great. There is definitely an aspect related to entrepreneurship. So anything that gives you exposure to startups or an entrepreneurial experience will work very well. Probably, sorry, if I have to add to the quant, anything related to finance / engineering will be a great add-on. My experience personally, I had worked in a technology company for a few months. And again, I was business analyst of the sales team there. Prior, I had worked for a startup incubator, so a place that launches startups, and I was doing business development. And I had done an internship in venture capital. So, the three were kind of, they had some of the skills that are transferable to management and strategy more generally, but definitely always with a quantitative component and data analysis component.
That was super comprehensive. And the only thing that I have to add to that is I have seen people leverage like any sort of client-facing role nicely into consulting. So I actually did not intern in consulting. I interned in wealth management, which was kind of quantitative, but really what I ended up talking about was just relationship management and working above my level essentially and trying to convince clients to take a particular action, and that sort of persuasive piece.
Yeah, even if
I have nothing to add. So go on.
Even if you don't do a consulting internship, you can also look to see if there are consulting opportunities on campus. So again, I didn't do a consulting internship or anything before I landed my full-time offer, but I was pretty heavily involved with one of the consulting organizations that was on campus for me, in addition to the case competitions, as I know has been hammered quite a bit on this call. But yeah, there are definitely other ways to show that you're flexing those consulting skill sets. And I will say there were a couple courses I was able to take at Cornell that were a little bit more consulting focused or more like business strategy related that I will also talk about in some of my interviews.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I was having some trouble coming off mute. Thanks for those additional insights. It can definitely be a little nerve-wracking for students as, they try to translate, some of their non-consulting experience to be applicable to some of the work that you would be doing, at a specific firm. So I guess in that same vein, we'd love to hear your guys' insight in terms of preparing for case interviews, which can be very daunting. Do you have any strategies in terms of how you guys were able to be successful in them? What were some of the challenges? And again, how did you overcome some of the difficult aspects of consulting prep, of case prep?
I can take this one. I think just getting in front of as many people as many like practice interviewers as you possibly can. There are many different books out there that can kind of help you with some frameworks and just help you with your preparation. But I think what really helped me was just get in front of as many people as I can to get as many cases, go through many cases, and just be able to be comfortable with the process, because no two cases are the same, and it can be a pretty daunting experience. But if you start early and just have a thorough preparation, it'll position you for success.
Yeah, just to add to Francisco, do it with people who are also recruiting for consulting as well. As I have been doing some recruiting on my own over these past couple of weeks, doing it with friends has been interesting to hear, like how they have structured a case or how they've thought about a certain interview question, which has sparked my own ideas and some anecdotes that I wanted to pull for myself. So I think it's a great knowledge share that way too. It just opens up your mind a little bit to some great answers that you may have in the back of your mind that just need to be teased out.
What I also did while I was prepping, although this is 4 or 5 years ago, and I hear that there are new things now, there's like Pymetrics and everything, but for the typical case interview, a good intro book is always Crack the Case, or like the case interview by Mark something. I found Victor Cheng's like oral case guides actually really helpful, because I would pause and try to answer and then hear the person answer and then hear Victor Cheng correct him. And so I was able to sort of case myself a little bit before I actually went in to do live case interviews. Great, yeah. I see all the titles, cool.
One thing that ended up helping me at the end of the day, and like I went through all of these things too, but I think part of it ended up just being a mental game. And I used to get really, really, really flustered if I would like make a math mistake at the beginning of the math section and just be like, oh my God, I just ruined the entire thing. But oftentimes both, as I was going through the process and on the other side too, when I was interviewing with people, I think if you're able to write your own ship and just like get back on track from a logic perspective, then it's really okay. And I think I ended up making a math mistake probably in every single case interview I ever did. And I was still able to get a job at the end of the day. So like taking a little bit of the pressure off, you don't have to be 150% perfect every single time. It's really just about your thinking.
And one more thing that I'd love to add, probably in line with Kat's experience, but it's like, I know that most people focus on case preparation, but I remembered that I had invested a bit of time also in the way I wanted to present myself, because you actually have in the interview is actually structured in 3 different parts, and the interviewer is actually looking for different things. So in the first one, as you present yourself there, and probably in the last one too, they're looking for the basic characteristics of a potentially successful consultant, which we have mentioned already. So the quant skills and the interpersonal skills. They're looking for some professional maturity, because I think in most firms, and please guys correct me if it's not the case in yours, but I think like 2 weeks in the job, you will be facing very senior clients. So in the interviews already, they kind of scout for that professional maturity. And so I actually, because I also was feeling a bit insecure and a bit nervous, I really worked on, my presence, my gravitas, and making sure that I was going there with the best energy, not just acing the case part or not acing.
Yeah, I think it's really important to always just go in with confidence no matter what, because I think with all interviews, if you're having a good time, there's a good chance that the interviewer will also have a good time as well. So we did want to switch gears a little. We have some more specific or targeted questions for some of our panelists. And so this next question is actually for Alice and Brian, and actually Julian as well. But I know that a lot of consulting recruiting happens through like on-campus recruiting. It's a pretty formal structured process, but there are other ways to enter into consulting as well. And so we'd love to hear from you what it was like sort of recruiting post graduation or post this sort of time box, like time in the fall or whenever it falls. And then also how you sort of approached, networking and connecting with people at the firm before you actually even began the process of interviewing.
Is the question recruiting while you're still in senior year, but after the formal recruiting period? Is that the question?
Yeah, so I think for Alice, that might be her specific question, but like if you, for instance, recruited after you graduated, sort of how did you like re-engage or make those connections after you were outside of the time box bubble or direct resources of your school?
Got it. Okay. I have a point of view on that. So if you, did a year at a place that's not consulting and then wanted to lateral in, at least for BCG, the best way by far, which all of you will have access to this way, is through a friend referral currently already at the firm. And I've referred a couple of my friends that way, and they almost always get an interview because the associate is putting sort of their reputation on the line. So HR gives the benefit of the doubt. There's a resume screen, but the resume should, if you come from Wharton, the resume screen should be fine. So that is by far the best way. And I don't think you need to do cold networking at all. You'll have friends from Wharton who are going to get into these firms, and you'll just know them because you've done a consulting recruiting prep. So you can always hit them up a year after and be like, hey, I want to take another shot at this.
Yeah, not just Wharton, also Penn. Amazing.
Yes,
amazing
sorry.
resume.
Yeah, broadly UPenn.
Yeah. No, just making fun of you, Brian. Sorry. Yeah, so I absolutely this would be my same advice. In terms of networking, because I thought when I was still in college, I thought that I wanted to do consulting. And so I literally attended every possible event. As I was writing in the chat, those are great, like the workshops and every possible event that these firms organize is typically to really prepare you, and it's a great time investment to get better in shape for the interviews. Then I remember doing great case prep workshops, but also I remember that when I was networking, it wasn't necessarily to get the business card of the person, because again, it's not needed. And for most firms, they will literally give you a great chance of your resume being reviewed fairly just if you apply online. Like in that sense, they're very diligent and fair. But I remember that I was networking to kind of like get a sense of the culture and type of people that would have been then in the offices or in the firm. And that honestly was truly helpful, because again, to build on the earlier point of confidence, if you get the chance to, spend even 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, just chatting with somebody that is already in the job, and you realize that they're smiley, they're warm, you're like, you vibe well with them. In the end, I feel that when you go to the interviews, you have more chances of feeling like you could belong to that office and that place, versus if you don't have a great experience with someone that you talk to. I would recommend, not necessarily applying there. So I always suggest, especially if it's your first important interviews, or, if you didn't have many years, I always suggest to take an interview as, an opportunity where it's not just the interviewer reviewing you, but it's also you trying to see whether you vibe with them.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing both your guys' input. I'll just add, since I guess this question was also addressed to me as well. So a bit of my background. So I worked in retail at Target before I transitioned into consulting. I was doing federal consulting primarily for the military. And so the way that I was able to transition into consulting is what Brian and Alicia have already referenced. I got a referral through a friend and was kind of like swiftly put through this interviewing process. But I mean, I met with about 5 or 6 different people. It was nice because I knew what project I was going to be on and the team that I was interviewing for. So that was nice, compared to like doing consulting on campus where you don't really know where you're going to be placed. So I could speak more specific to the type of work that I was going to be doing during the recruiting process. But networking is definitely really important. What I like to tell a lot of students is, the people who you all are going to be reaching out to were once in your shoes and our shoes as well. Like, in 5 to 10 years from now, like even sooner than that, people are going to be reaching out to you. So, they're paying it forward, and there's going to be the same expectation of you sooner down the road. So definitely don't be afraid to, ask for what you want. But I'll get off my soapbox and ask. We're going to ask our panelists one more question, and then we'll open it up to the rest of our audience. And so this question is going to be directed to Inga, Francisco, and Kat. Can you all speak to the process of, finding specialties from your generalist roles?
Sure. So I think the beauty of having an analyst development program to go through is that you are a generalist for 2 years. So I was allowed to try out a lot of different projects in varying industries and also lines of work. So over those 2 years, I definitely took advantage of that. Some people go into this program knowing exactly what they want to do, whether industry or function, and they stick with it for those 2 years and love it. I personally just had no clue, so I bopped around, and that worked well for me. So in deciding where I wanted to align after those first 2 years, I just thought about first, like, the people. Who were the people that I really got along with well, especially knowing that those were the people that I primarily spend my time with for the most part. Like, did I get along with them? Were there people who really sponsored me or, mentored me, really took care of me while I was on their projects? So that was the first thing. And then second thing, I kind of thought about my exit opportunities as well. Like, what did I want to do after consulting? What function or what industry would set me up for success? And then I guess the third thing was also just, my interest level as well. It's like, if I'm going to spend all my time doing it, like, what were the projects that I felt the most engaged in? So those were kind of my 3 criteria in specializing.
Yeah, just to follow up, I had a very similar experience to Inga. I really enjoyed bopping around and getting kind of exposure to different kinds of projects and meeting just a myriad of people. But in deciding where I wanted to specialize, I had always been very interested in like fashion and the apparel industries. And Accenture Strategy had recently done an acquisition of Kurt Salmon, which is like the premier retail strategy consultancy based in New York. Worked with, Saks and other very famous kind of players in the apparel industry. And so I just networked with people in Kurt Salmon and then kind of just transitioned over into their practice once it became the retail strategy practice. So I was there for 3 years and it was a great experience. I loved the people, and that was a very and just the content and the kind of work that I was doing was very interesting to me. So yeah, that's, I think content and people were the criteria for me.
So my experience was a little bit different just because Deloitte doesn't force you to align until much further on in your career. So I ended up sort of by stroke of luck on an M&A project at my second project at the firm. And I had gotten on this project just, we have formally assigned counselors, and I was chatting with Doug, and he was like, yeah, I think like based on your interests, like you may as well just want to try this out. Like if you hate it, then you hate it, you move on with your life. But if you like it, then it could be a good place to land, again, from just a people perspective. And once I got into the M&A community, from a content perspective and from a support perspective, in particular, there were a lot of really strong women in senior positions in the M&A sub-practice. And so I found a number of people who I could see as mentors, like lifelong mentors in that practice, and decided I kind of want to work with these people for the rest of my time at the firm. So while I did end up sort of officially changing my title when I was promoted to consultant, I like rebranded myself as an M&A person after that project and stuck around. But again, I think it's just like, it's a combination of certainly what feels right, who you want, if there's someone that has a rocket ship and you can get on the rocket ship, then certainly get on the rocket ship, and from a people perspective. And two, I don't know, it seems like the number of opportunities that were available to me if I had this skill set in my repertoire were varied and really interesting. And so I decided to do it and would never look back.
Awesome. Kat was in an M&A class with me last spring, and she had a lot of really good stories from her client side. So I know she had a good time there. So some questions are starting to come in via the chat, and the first one is actually about graduate degrees. And if you guys have knowledge of this, would love to hear your thoughts, your perspective. So do most consulting firms focus on hiring MBAs, or are there other graduate programs where an exit into consulting after graduating is possible?
Short answer is yes. In my start class, I think we had an MD. I was good friends with a PhD in chemistry. And I know we do take JDs. So the other graduate programs are very welcome, and they tend to thrive really well within BCG.
Same. I think the only thing that's different across different programs is if like you were in a 1-year master's program versus, a 3-year JD program, then you might enter at a slightly different level. But they do recruit directly from other master's programs.
Yeah, and that's in line with what I've also heard from other peers at Wharton and people who have graduated. So the next question is actually around COVID and consulting. And I know that we're all very immersed in the business school bubble, but just curious if you've sort of stayed in touch with your colleagues that might still be back at your old firms, and whether or not you sort of have a sense of how things have changed. So have you heard about there being less travel, or clients being a little bit more, understanding of maybe work not getting done as efficiently or productively, or just any changes, I guess, that has been brought about with COVID?
Yeah, I had a catch up recently with a large group of people from my office, and there's like, most companies aren't yet comfortable with having their employees back, and this is just going to last for a few more months. And as this situation is being prolonged now for a year, and so it's going to be for more than a year, everybody's just noticing the advantages of, for example, not traveling or having a couple of days of work from home. So I am hoping that this is like more flexibility is gonna be added, because back in our times, I would say that these aspect of traveling and long late hours in the office for me was very intense. Then take everything that I say with a grain of salt, because I like, my experience is very much affected by the office that I come from. So again, Italy, and if you don't speak Italian, it's not, it shouldn't be in your radar. And what is interesting, I don't know, Nicole, if this is also part of your question, but I know that a number of offices and firms have started to work on COVID, and for example, help governments or hospitals implement COVID, solutions to improve the situation related to the pandemic. So I know that there have been super interesting projects.
Yeah, the last project I did before coming to business school in August, there was a component of my clients' like 5-year vision on, in the next year, how they would be able to work more effectively, like in a COVID environment. So that was actually a part of the project, and Yeah, I know that several of my friends who are still there are working on things that are a little bit more COVID related.
Just to give a more long-term view on travel, and this is very BCG specific, but I think our CEO actually came out in public to say that the four-day travel, which is the predominant model today, for pre-COVID, is going to change. So like people shouldn't expect a 4-day travel model anymore. It'll be more flexible moving forward, and that's a view that him and I think the leadership take. I think BCG is also public about climate change, and I think they've targeted flight emissions as like a big one for BCG. And so the two combined, I think, would make it such that travel would go down, not just short term, but like medium to long term. It wouldn't be fully removed, but it'll go down by a certain amount, I think.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Brian said, within Accenture, there's been kind of, even before COVID, there was like a push to become a little more, let's say, local, right? So they split up the country into different regions, and whatever region you belong to, like they would try to put you in projects in that region. So like you wouldn't have to like travel across the country, for example. And so there was a push for people to be even like local. So in New York, in particular, there were many opportunities for me to just like stay there and kind of like have a regular job without having to travel. And I think that post-COVID, I think that's only going to be even further emphasized. And I think that there might be a collective push in the industry to, if there isn't like a really strong reason for you to like travel across the country, for example, at least within Accenture, that's kind of where we're moving to.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I've just heard so many opinions about the traveling with the consulting job, and some love it and some are kind of against it, and that it kind of takes them away from their friends and where they're living originally. So to think about consulting with it without having to do like the 4-day travel kind of weekly thing is just a whole different, I guess, way to think about it. But thank you for letting me know. Also, Julian, I love your background.
Yeah, there's also like the only positive thing about traveling, and again, you will hear me say many very negative and critical things about my experience in Milan, but the positive was that I eventually had great relationships with my colleagues, because you end up spending so much time with the people in your team, and and you have breakfast together because you have breakfast together and dinner together because you're in the same hotel. And I just, I don't think that I ever built similar relationships in other places. And it's crazy because with some of these teams, you only work together for 3 months. And so that part is fun.
Awesome. So we have one more question, and I think it's very fitting to close this out. Do you guys have any advice of ways that applicants might maximize their chances of being hired, or even just really standing out with their application?
I think it goes back a lot to what Alicia talked about earlier about, developing relationships with people in a particular office, figuring out, obviously they're interviewing you, but you also need to see if you're a good culture fit for them. And if I remember, I think I met and chatted with one of the Deloitte recruiters before the interviews. It was even nice when I walked into an interview just to see a friendly face and to then sit down and be like, all right, like everything's going to be okay. I really like these people. Seems like it might be a good fit. I'm confident that things will work out. So I think anytime you can find that personal connection, then just build it further and further.
Yeah, just to add to that, a couple of points. Getting involved in case competitions and potentially winning them can be a great kind of popping factor in your resume. And also making sure to take coursework that kind of that aligns with that with consulting, and kind of putting it on the top of your resume can also make your resume stand out from others.
I know
Yeah,
that,
I
for
will.
example, sorry, Inga, go ahead. You first.
Okay, just one quick thing is like if you don't end up doing consulting full-time right out of school, you can also join like nonprofit consulting organizations like in larger cities. For instance, in New York, there's something called Net Impact, where you were able to work with I think like NGOs and nonprofits doing like small consulting projects for them. So just having that experience on the side and then maybe trying to recruit again, you know, sometime down the line is also helpful as well. Just demonstrating your interest and then also showing that you have that experience as well.
Yeah, also overall, in my experience, any involvement, even as part of your college experience, any involvement in, you know, leadership roles, clubs, organizations, if you've tried to launch something by your own, you know, anything that shows proactivity and interest in taking leadership positions is going to be very well regarded.
Brian, do you want to close this out? I feel like you probably have something to say about it.
I was actually saying that I don't have anything to say. But is this the last question essentially?
Yes, there's a lot. We're at 8 o'clock. It's the last question. So it's fine if you don't have anything to add this time.
No, I echo everything that folks have said. For the interviews, I don't know if this question was about like standing out in interviews as well, but you can think about it in terms of like solving the case, communication, and then culture fit. And so solving the case is pretty simple. You just have to solve the case within a certain time frame. Communication is just how you do it. The ideal way to do it is to make the other person feel at ease, feel like it's fun. And then culture fit is probably the one that has the least hard metrics tied to it. But for example, in BCG, we are interviewee led. And so you have to show that you can keep driving and keep driving and keep driving. And ideally the interviewer, you know, doesn't step in at all. That's like the ideal state for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for all of your great insight. I hope that everyone in the folks in the audience were able to get some good nuggets from this conversation. I definitely enjoyed hearing from all of you.